What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about how branding and marketing distorts reality and controls your mind. Very, very large claim, but I promise there's some sophistication behind it, right? So I mean, I think a good example to start off with this idea, right, is how, distorting reality in the sense that it's controlling the way you're perceiving and using and thinking about an object, right? So I can give you an example, a sort of simple one, of let's say you have a black t-shirt, sort of an unbranded black t-shirt you maybe buy from a convenience store, right? Now this thing generally is not, it's not a designer brand or some big streetwear brand. It's like anybody can get it, very achievable for most people to go ahead and get a hold of this, right? Now if you were to go ahead and slap, now you can either physically put the logo on there, or you can tell somebody that it has it and convince them of that, right? You'd say it's a Louis Vuitton logo, Gucci, Balenciaga, Off-White, Nike, any of these brands, right? You don't even have to physically put the logo on there. You can just associate that logo with it and say this is a Louis Vuitton or a Balenciaga t-shirt or whatever. All of a sudden, if people are convinced of that, right, which is sort of the job of branding and marketing, right, they're now in a sense given an instruction, a lens of viewing the object, a prior, right, that they now treat it completely differently, right? Now this thing is gonna be way more expensive. They will literally give more of their bank account to you, right? Because of the way this thing is being perceived by them, right? Not only the, the monetary thing, but also like the product, you may, if it's a very expensive, valuable thing, you may feel differently when wearing it, right? So it's not hard to believe that when you wear something that's thought of as very valuable or expensive or exclusive, you may feel a little more confident. You may feel, maybe you'll have a bit more of an ego or a little arrogance, or your sense of self would be a little different, right? I mean, I think a lot of people wear clothes of a certain brands or cars of a certain brands or whatever because of that sort of linguistic synesthetic association, right? Where there's not necessarily a physically different thing, but the branding of it, the perception of it that's shared between you and other parties and agents now has this effect. And so, yeah, when I put on some really nice piece of clothing, even if I think maybe it looks ugly, there's a level of myself that I'm like, oh man, I feel more confident, right? And this is also why we say, the way you dress yourself, right? Like you could have somebody who's the savior of everything, the smartest person, whatever, and maybe they're really good looking, right? Like way better looking than me or anybody that even exists, right? Whatever. You have that person. And the interesting thing with that though, is that you can dress them up a certain way, and that will also change the context of those clothes, right? So I also would say that if you have someone that's more familiar and understood and known and associated as attractive or powerful or valuable, that also changes the context of the thing that's applied and distributed on it, right? So this is also part of why, when we give celebrities or notable figures clothes, products, or whatever to use or wear, that also changes the social context and agreement of that product, right? In a lot of ways, this is kind of the brilliant story of how Nike launched to the heights that they did with Michael Jordan and all that, right? And it's interesting, if I were to design a very basic, let's just say the t-shirt, just not a lot of effort was put into it. In my opinion, it may not look that good, but if I get someone who's in a very large position of influence to wear this, that's respected for their fashion or clothing or reputation or whatever, all of a sudden that changes that. I didn't change anything physically about the product, right? This time I'm not even, telling you it's a Louis Vuitton product or whatever. I'm giving it to this person. They're photographed seen wearing this, whatever. And now this is sought after. It's more exclusive. The value goes through the roof. And not only that, but it can literally change the way you feel when you see the product or you wear it or you use it or whatever, right? And you also have to think about the way we create ecosystems, right? The sort of, one of the aspects about top companies or universities or whatever is there is that border, that exclusiveness, right? There is a shared agreement between the people that are in it that these are the people that are not in it, because that's sort of what defines the distinction in the first place. And so yes, when you look at top schools and organizations and companies and products or whatever, the branding, the marketing is the appeal. It's not that it's fake or it's not needed. It's very much a real part of the fabric about how that fits into a society and a culture and a collective. You actually kind of need that to a degree, right? Because that acts as the instructions, sort of this kind of, it's a sort of a more linguistic, cognitive, whatever, set of instructions and ways of viewing the thing. And in a lot of ways, you can actually work more efficiently because it may cost you less if that's directly put into some type of cultural context, if that makes sense at all. And so, I can also talk about Apple, for instance, right? In a lot of ways of what Apple has done with their whole reality distortion field effect thing, right? Is that it's not the product that's as valuable, it's actually the system, it's the whole. It's the whole versus the parts that are valuable, right? if you have the whole Apple ecosystem, which some people do and some people don't, right? Some people can still get by with just one product. But generally, I think it would probably feel a little bit more rewarding to be a part of that ecosystem. And not only you and your family, but also your friends and the people you interact with, right? That's in a sense that, ecosystem is like an organism. It has these boundaries, it has this internal coherence between itself, and there is this, this kind of mutual agreement between you and the users about who you are and what you're doing, because that's cultural. I can tell you right now, if Apple changed the way iMessage looked and it was no longer blue and everything was green or a different color, people would feel differently about it. Right? If your iPhone or your Mac or Apple Watch had a slight different look to it and different branding, would you still think of it and use it in the same way? Right? And it's the same reason that, these sort of cognitive, linguistic, symbolic things that we add onto something, say, physical, can dramatically change the way that they're used and contextualized and understood. And even those associations can literally change the way that we feel and interact with it. Now also, I'll tie into another type of apple, which is not the company, but the fruit, right? So if you think about the way we think about the things that we consume just in general, in this case, we'll use, say, the apple fruit, right? I'm willing to bet if you were to take, 2 apples, let's just say they were non-organic, conventionally raised, whatever, and if you were to convince one person that this is the highest quality apple, it's got all these different things, whatever, it's really, really good for you, would we notice a difference in how their body reacted to that apple? Right, now, I think there has been stuff where we've looked at about the placebo for glucose and stuff like that to some degree, but I'm willing to bet if strong enough of an association was there, they would probably have a slightly different biological response to it that we could measure, right? And that's literally by just branding and marketing it differently, right? I actually think, in some of the supposed benefits we can see about things that are considered healthy, I genuinely think that a lot of the things that may make it actually healthier for people is the marketing and the branding and, in a sense, the belief that that is actually good for them, right? Now, I'm not saying it's going to do it, cure you of everything, but it may be enough to, get some momentum rolling with that, right? And it probably wouldn't be very hard to figure this out, in an experimental setting. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to generally muse a little bit about how branding and marketing are basically our perceptual lens, our language of viewing reality and interacting with these objects, products, services, whatever. Maybe I can finish off with one more example that you could also probably try yourself right now. It would be, let's say there's a film or an album or song or whatever by a very well-known, respected artist, right? Whoever it is. And let's just say you practiced disconnecting the context of that artist. So let's just say that song was no longer that was no longer a Beatles song, or this is no longer a Nirvana song, this is no longer a Led Zeppelin song, this is no longer a Travis Scott song, Eminem song, Juice WRLD song, whatever it is, right? Or this is no longer a Chris Nolan movie or a Denis Villeneuve or anything, right? Just disconnect that. If you were to look at it as some new random person who's coming up, would you still experience the film in the same way? I think sometimes you would, but also sometimes you wouldn't. And I've actually experimented with this a lot over the years. And there are songs and films and photos and all sorts of works of art and products or whatever, that as soon as I disconnect that context of the brand and the reputation and those priors, it no longer has the same visceral feeling to me. It doesn't feel the same anymore, right? And this may also be a way for you to sort of judge things differently. Like maybe part of the reason you like this person's song or this movie is because there's this sort of prior expectation that's painting over it, like it's almost forcing you to like it, even if otherwise, in a different context, you wouldn't like that, right? So I think it's just something to think about. I imagine that a lot of artists, just in the nature of their job and their skill set, probably think about this a little bit more than, say, people generally in like the STEM field, although they most certainly do at times. And so I don't know, I just thought that was something interesting to talk about. Ramble on for a little bit, maybe gives you some ideas. Feel free to comment any questions or things that come up, and I will start to post more videos pretty soon and often now. And last thing, please like and subscribe. Thank you.